There are legendary seasons in the NBA that get talked about forever, like Michael Jordan's unstoppable run in 1991, Shaquille O'Neal's pure dominance in 2000, and Kobe Bryant's scoring rampage in 2006. But in all that time, has there ever been a year like Stephen Curry's 2016? This was when a smaller, baby-faced guard shattered three-point records, defied every scouting report, and led the Golden State Warriors to one of the greatest regular seasons basketball has ever witnessed. Yet, after months of rewriting history, it all ended with heartbreak so stunning that it divided fans for years. Some call it the season that changed the NBA forever, while others see it as the biggest lost opportunity in modern sports. It began with a man who had only recently stepped out of the shadow of fragile ankles and into the limelight as a star. But the scrutiny was just as intense as the praise. Critics said his 2015 success was a fluke, a stroke of luck aided by opponent injuries and an easy path to the title. He heard every word. He felt every doubt. Instead of getting bogged down, though, Stephen Curry took those doubts and transformed them into fire. It was a level of motivation that would power him through eye-popping performances, blowout wins, and jaw-dropping buzzer beaters that felt as if they were drawn straight from a video game. But that was only the beginning. In a league dominated by towering superstars, Steph flipped the script and showed that long-range shooting and finesse could stand toe-to-toe with power and brute force. Crowds across the country watched him pull up from 30 feet as if it were a simple mid-range jumper, netting more three-pointers in a season than anyone ever had. In many ways, 2016 was a season of illusions, of making the impossible look routine. But illusions can break, and when they do, they leave questions that linger for years. Keep watching, because what happened in that final chapter took everyone by surprise, and still sparks debates about whether that 2016 run was the greatest individual campaign ever, or a lesson that triumphs in April and May can vanish under the brightest lights in June. A year prior, Stephen Curry was seen as a talented but still evolving guard who had only recently shrugged off the label of being injury-prone. He battled a string of ankle issues that nearly derailed his potential early in his career. Doctors, trainers, and the Warriors organization weren't even sure how dependable he could be in the long run. When the 2014-15 season arrived, though, all those question marks disappeared. He claimed the league MVP, the Warriors soared to the top seed, and they raced through the playoffs to win the franchise's first championship in 4 decades. Yet, in a surprising twist, the broader NBA community didn't seem fully convinced. Critics latched onto a narrative that Golden State's opponents, most notably the Cleveland Cavaliers, were plagued by injuries. Some pointed out that Kyrie Irving missed most of the series, that Kevin Love was sidelined, and that the Warriors dodged other top contenders along the way. The dismissal of Curry's accomplishments took a personal turn when Andre Iguodala, not Curry, was awarded Finals MVP. That fueled chatter that Curry hadn't delivered when it truly counted, and that the Warriors were essentially lucky champions. Heading into 2016, that backdrop of skepticism fueled every conversation about Stephen Curry. In interviews, he famously said he was sorry for being healthy and playing who was in front of them, signaling a sarcastic acceptance of all the outside noise. Deep down, he had a point to prove, not just to the league, but to himself. And he wasted no time in doing so. When the 2016 season tipped off, Golden State raised their long-awaited championship banner. It was the perfect capstone for an offseason dominated by doubts. Then came the big question. Could these Warriors truly dominate again, or were they one-hit wonders as so many suggested? Right out of the gate, Curry decided to set the record straight. On opening night, he dropped 40 points in just 35 minutes, dishing out assists, sprinting through defenders, and draining threes that made the crowd roar. Once the final buzzer sounded, the message was clear. There would be no championship hangover. But if that first game showed he was on a mission, the following performances proved just how unstoppable he could be. Curry erupted for 53 points against the Pelicans in a display that included a 28-point third quarter, where he made the defense look like it was stuck in quicksand. He ran circles around them, hitting every type of shot imaginable, from behind-the-back dribble layups to step-back triples that barely ruffled the net. Fans who had doubts the year before were now forced to marvel at his creativity. It felt like a clinic in scoring and ball handling, The Warriors kept stacking up wins, and a few weeks into the season, they were looking at a 10-0 record, blowing out some teams and edging out others in nail-biters. Every outing felt like a potential 40 or 50-point explosion from Curry. By mid-November, the team was 10-0, then 12-0, then 15-0, and still rising. Suddenly, history was on everyone's mind. Could they break the all-time record for the best start to a season? More importantly, if they kept up this pace, could they topple the mighty 72-10 record set by Michael Jordan's 1996 Chicago Bulls? When you watch highlight reels from those early weeks, you see a type of performance that seemed almost unreal. Curry was hitting circus threes on a nightly basis, sometimes pulling up from several feet beyond the arc, with defenders draped all over him. The opposition was baffled about how to guard him. Guard him tightly at the three-point line, and he would blow by you with crafty dribbles, sag off, and he'd sink a shot from distances previously considered ill-advised. The Warriors ran their system with machine-like precision, moving the ball in dizzying sequences until it found the open man. Often that open man was Curry, and more times than not, the scoreboard lit up with another three. Meanwhile, the Warriors' defense, anchored by Draymond Green, was stifling teams on the perimeter and in the paint. It wasn't just Curry's scoring that had them undefeated. The whole roster knew its role, and Steph's gravity behind the arc made everyone else's job easier. Soon, the unthinkable happened. Golden State soared to 15-0, tying the best start in NBA history. Then, they hit 16-0 to break the record. Momentum continued, 17-0, 18-0, 19-0, and the streak rolled all the way to 24-0 before they finally suffered their first loss to an unassuming Milwaukee Bucks team. Afterward, critics briefly jumped in to say the Warriors' bubble had burst. But in truth, 24-1 was still a jaw-dropping record, far surpassing any preseason expectations for how well they'd bounce back from championship celebrations. Behind all of this was Curry's personal quest. Nightly, he was delivering masterclasses. His stats were skyrocketing past his 2015 MVP numbers, making the league wonder if we were looking at a back-to-back MVP scenario, one that might be decided earlier than any MVP race before. Even media folks who tended to be harsh on new stars admitted he was leading the pack by a wide margin. Not everyone was enchanted, though. In some circles, there were whispers that such a high-volume style of three-point shooting was bound to collapse under playoff pressure. "Live by the three, die by the three," they said. Anonymous league sources speculated that the Warriors' pace would eventually catch up with them, leading to injuries or cold shooting nights. Some rumored that other teams were figuring out how to contain Curry by getting physical with him. It didn't help the skepticism that Curry's slender frame looked drastically different from typical MVP winners like LeBron James or Shaq. Observers kept waiting for the moment it would all come crashing down. But as winter approached and turned the corner into 2016, the Warriors' wins piled up, and Curry's stats became even more mind-boggling. By late January, he'd tallied multiple 40-point games and a handful of 50-point outbursts, including a ridiculous display where he sank 11 threes in one contest. In February, he reached a new level entirely. He notched another 50-point game and made the Nets sizzle with an accuracy that defied logic. And then came the moment everyone would remember, arguably the signature highlight of that entire season. A Saturday night showdown against Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook's Oklahoma City Thunder. The clash between the Warriors and the Thunder was one of the most highly anticipated regular season battles all year. The Thunder featured two MVP-caliber players, and they were hungry to prove they belonged at the top. At home, OKC roared out of the gates. The tension in the building was palpable. You could sense the crowd's desire to see their team topple these seemingly unbeatable Warriors. But when the final seconds of regulation ticked away, the Warriors found themselves in a position to force overtime. Curry had already scored in bunches and tied the single-game record for three-pointers made, yet nobody could have guessed how the night would end. The game went to overtime, with both squads landing counterpunches. Then, with only seconds left and the score tied, the ball found its way into Curry's hands well beyond the line. Instead of dribbling closer or calling timeout, he simply pulled up from 32 feet, letting it fly as if it were a routine free throw. The moment froze in time. Swish. That was it. No backboard, no rim, just net. OKC's fans stood in stunned silence. On the Warriors' sideline, teammates jumped up and down in delirious celebration. In living rooms across the country, hearts seemed to skip a beat. Steph's smile lit up the screen as he pounded his chest in triumphant glee. It was a game winner for the ages, and the highlight looped endlessly on sports networks for days. That shot did more than just push the Warriors' record higher. It felt like a statement that the conventional rules of basketball no longer apply. By now, talk of a second straight MVP was more of a coronation than a debate. Curry was on pace to do something no one had done. Not just repeat as MVP, but potentially win it unanimously. His improved scoring average, off-the-charts efficiency, and the Warriors' dominance had transformed him into the face of the league. The next question was whether Golden State could surpass the 72-10 record set by Michael Jordan's 1996 Bulls, a mark many fans thought would stand forever. As March rolled on, the Warriors remained near the top of the standings, rarely dropping games. Every time they stumbled, even if it was once every few weeks, the conversation would resurrect. They can't keep this up. Yet they bounced back time after time. While many fans cheered for them to shatter the record, others felt it was almost disrespectful to compare them to the Jordan-led dynasty. Nightly debates lit up social media, talk shows, and sports bars everywhere. Some folks stood by the Bulls, certain that the Warriors' brand of small ball and heavy three-point shooting wouldn't hold up in any comparison to the bruising style of the 90s. Warriors faithful, on the other hand, believed they were witnessing history in real time. By the final week of the regular season, Golden State was sitting on 69 wins with 4 games left, needing perfection to reach 73-9. This pressure hadn't been felt by any team in decades. The looming question was whether they would rest players for the playoffs or give one last push to snag the record. Steph and the team decided to chase immortality. The final stretch began with a strong statement, beating the Spurs, who themselves had won 67 games that year. Next, a narrow 1-point win over Memphis kept the dream alive. Then, in San Antonio, a place no visiting team had won all season, the Warriors handed the Spurs their first home loss. Steph was unstoppable, dropping 37 points. And finally, on the last day of the season, the Warriors met Memphis again. Curry put on one last show, scoring 46 points and drilling 10 threes. When the buzzer sounded, the crowd roared in euphoria. The Warriors were the first team ever to go 73-9. And in that same game, Curry became the only player to surpass 400 threes in a single season, ending at 402. He finished the year at an astounding 45% from beyond the arc, on an unprecedented number of attempts. It was official. No one had ever seen anything like 2016 Steph Curry. Soon after, he was named the first unanimous MVP in league history, another testament to how far ahead of the field he was. For all their regular season glory, the Warriors knew that in the end, championships define a season's legacy. Curry's iconic year would become the stuff of legend only if they finished the job. Yet almost immediately, the path turned rocky. In the first round against Houston, Steph rolled his ankle in Game 1, forcing him to miss Games 2 and 3. The Warriors still found ways to win, but when he returned in Game 4, disaster struck again. He slipped on a wet spot on the court, spraining his MCL. Speculation erupted over how serious the injury was. Some rumored it might sideline him for the entire playoffs. Others whispered that he'd never be 100% for the rest of the run. The Warriors, flaunting their strength in numbers motto, managed to dispatch the Rockets without him. Then came the second round against Portland. He missed the first 3 games there too, but the team held a 2-1 lead in his absence. When Curry finally returned in Game 4, he looked rusty until overtime. In that extra period, he poured in 17 points, an NBA record for points scored in an OT session. By the end, he had racked up 40-plus points and was yelling, "I'm back," to the Portland crowd. It was an emphatic announcement that even on a bum knee, he could still drop jaws. The Warriors eliminated the Blazers and cruised to the Western Conference Finals, facing Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook once again. While Golden State arrived as strong favorites against OKC, the Thunder had the star power to fight back. After splitting the first 2 games, the Warriors traveled to Oklahoma City for Games 3 and 4, where they got blown out in both. Suddenly, the record-breaking 73-9 squad stared at a 3-1 series deficit. Only a handful of teams in NBA history had ever climbed out of such a hole, and no team with that many wins had ever found itself on the brink of elimination so early. Steph's critics roared back to life, claiming the injuries had finally caught up to him, or that the rigors of the season had drained him. After all, he wasn't shooting with his usual accuracy, and the Thunder's length and athleticism seemed to slow him down. Meanwhile, Durant and Westbrook found ways to exploit every gap in Golden State's defense. But champions don't fold quietly. In Game 5, Curry dropped 31 points, and Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and the rest of the Warriors stepped up on both ends of the floor. They won convincingly to send the series back to OKC for Game 6. That's when Game 6 Klay became a legend, exploding for 41 points and 11 made threes in a brilliant performance that overshadowed everything else. Yet Curry's 31 points and near triple-double also carried them through the tense final minutes. All of a sudden, the momentum changed. The Warriors forced a decisive Game 7 back at Oracle Arena. Facing the roaring home crowd, Curry delivered 36 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds, hitting clutch threes in the final quarter that slammed the door on OKC's hopes. The Warriors became only the 10th team in NBA history to overcome a 3-1 deficit. The improbable comeback was complete, and once again, it looked like the Warriors were unstoppable. Standing in the Warriors' way was a familiar foe, LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. This time, both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love were healthy, setting the stage for a real test of Golden State's supercharged style. In the opening 2 games at Oracle Arena, the Warriors steamrolled Cleveland. The first victory came despite a lackluster 11-point game from Curry. Klay Thompson and the bench picked up the slack, demonstrating the team's depth. In Game 2, Curry improved slightly with an 18-point effort, and the Warriors enjoyed a 33-point blowout. At this point, it seemed like Cleveland was simply overmatched. They managed to win Game 3 in a 30-point rout of their own, but the Warriors stormed back in Game 4 behind Curry's 38 points. With the series at 3-1, the Champions Trophy appeared to be well within reach. Fans started anticipating a coronation at home in Game 5. But behind the scenes, a single event flipped everything. Draymond Green was suspended for accumulating too many flagrant foul points after a scuffle with LeBron. Without Draymond's defensive and playmaking presence, the Warriors lost Game 5 at home. Critics pointed to that suspension as the turning point, although Curry's own struggles in that matchup also drew attention. Then, in Game 6, he found himself in foul trouble early, racking up call after call. In a moment of frustration and disbelief, he threw his mouthpiece, accidentally hitting a fan in the stands, and was immediately ejected. The image of a furious Curry, who usually kept his cool, challenging the referees became one of the lasting visuals of that series. All of a sudden, a commanding 3-1 lead had dwindled to a 3-3 tie. With the championship on the line, Game 7 would decide everything. The drama was palpable as Oracle Arena braced for the biggest game of the year. A single night would define the narrative around Curry's unprecedented season. The game itself was a tense, defensive slugfest. Neither team found its offensive rhythm early, and Curry, in particular, couldn't get loose for the kind of shooting night people had grown used to seeing. Each missed three felt heavier than usual, as if the weight of the entire 73-9 record pressed on his shoulders. As the clock wound down in a tie game, Kyrie Irving isolated Curry on the wing and drilled a step-back triple, putting Cleveland ahead by 3 points with under a minute left. Golden State got the ball back, and fans held their breath as Curry attempted to respond with his own long-range shot. He missed. The Cavs closed out the final seconds, and LeBron James delivered Cleveland its first major sports championship in decades. For Curry and the Warriors, the sting was unforgettable. The greatest regular season in NBA history ended in heartbreak. When the dust settled, the narrative took a sharp turn. No longer did people focus on Curry's 402 three-pointers, his unanimous MVP, or the team's miraculous 73 wins. The conversation zeroed in on the finals collapse. Detractors insisted that a team can't be considered the best ever if they don't end the season with a ring. Comparisons to the 1996 Bulls popped up in every corner of sports media, with Jordan loyalists declaring the debate closed for good. Curry faced criticism that he disappeared in the clutch. People pointed to his subpar shooting percentages in the finals, claiming the physicality of playoff basketball exposed him. The mouthpiece incident also gave critics reason to question his composure under pressure. Even some of the game's legends weighed in, cautioning that regular season feats mean little if you can't close it out when it matters most. In the weeks that followed, rumors began swirling about the Warriors recruiting Kevin Durant, an idea that seemed unthinkable earlier in the season. Why would a 73-win team need another MVP? But the loss stung so badly that Golden State's front office decided they weren't going to settle for almost. When Durant eventually signed with the Warriors in July, it created a seismic shift. Years later, fans still argue about the meaning of 2016 Curry. On one hand, he unleashed an arsenal of shooting skills never before seen in professional basketball. He changed how teams defend, forcing them to pick him up near half-court. He set records for efficiency and volume that remain almost cartoonish on paper. And he led a franchise to 73 regular season wins, an achievement most thought impossible. On the other hand, his final act ended in disappointment. Losing a 3-1 lead in the finals overshadowed so much of the brilliance we witnessed for 7 straight months. It also left a question mark on how we measure greatness. Is it fair to disregard everything that came before just because he couldn't close the deal at the end? Some say yes, believing championships are the only true measure of an all-time great season. Others argue that records are meant to stand as testaments to what's possible in the game, ring or no ring. What's undeniable is how much the league changed in the wake of that season. Teams embraced the three-pointer more than ever. Young players mimicked Curry's one-motion shot release, practicing those deep threes relentlessly. Big men became stretch shooters, trying to expand their range to stay relevant. Even the pace of the game increased, with more teams attempting to replicate Golden State's pass-happy offense. 2016 Steph Curry showed us a glimpse of the future, where the three-point line is just another launching pad, not a limit. So how do we remember the 2016 version of Stephen Curry? Was it the single greatest season ever by an individual player? Or does the final heartbreak negate the magnitude of everything leading up to that point? Many fans remain divided. Some say no 73-win campaign can be overlooked, and that Curry's unanimous MVP stands as irrefutable proof of his historical impact. Others focus on those last 3 losses, the way his shot deserted him at the worst possible time, and the sense that such a fairy tale year was undone by a single moment in Game 7. In truth, both perspectives hold weight. The story of 2016 Curry is one of phenomenal peaks and crushing lows. It's a reminder that basketball, like life, can never be fully scripted. You can dominate for months on end, push the boundaries of what's physically possible, and yet still watch it slip away in the blink of an eye. But within that tension lies the reason we watch sports in the first place. We watch for the impossible comebacks and the devastating collapses, for the champion's swagger and the underdog's dream. No matter which side of the debate you land on, there's no denying that Stephen Curry's 2016 season left its mark on the game itself. He inspired a generation to pull the trigger from beyond the arc with confidence and skill few imagined possible. He and his team set a record many believed unbreakable. And though he faced bitter disappointment at the end, that very moment became a flashpoint that propelled him and the Warriors to retool, eventually leading to more championships down the road. Maybe the best way to describe 2016 Curry is simple. It was an anomaly. A year so stacked with surreal performances that it seemed to defy reason. A year that bent the shape of modern basketball, and a year that ended in heartbreak so profound it made the entire basketball world pause and wonder if we'd ever again witness a regular season run so mesmerizing, only to watch it vanish in an instant. And perhaps that's why, even today, fans still ask, what if he had just hit a few more of those threes in Game 7? What if that knee injury never happened? Could he have delivered the final heroic act to complete the perfect ending? Those are the questions that linger, giving 2016 Steph Curry its mystique. One thing's for sure, the debate and fascination aren't going away anytime soon. In the end, 2016 showed us how a player can transform an entire sport, spark endless what-ifs, and leave behind an unforgettable imprint, even without hoisting the trophy in the final game. Whether you see it as the greatest season ever or a cautionary tale about finishing what you start, there's no denying it changed the NBA forever. And that, in itself, is a legacy that can't be erased.